So welcome to On the Job podcast. I want to welcome Mike Donovan, our trust fund administrator. This is really one of our first episodes, so kind of bear with us. First time doing a podcast. It's a lot different than my Business Manager's Minute. But, the podcast is called Labor and Politics in Boston, but it's really much more than that. It's going to be anything that's Local 103 related, and nothing is more intimate to Local 103 members than their trust funds and their benefits and their health insurance and the pension and all that stuff. So I thought it would be a great idea to bring you down and have a conversation about the trust funds and about what's the most important thing to Local 103 members. So welcome to On the Job.
Thank you. Happy to be here and happy at any time to communicate, what we do to the membership or anybody in general. I think it's a very important thing, and I think it's one of the things that differentiates Local 103 and even in a broader sense, the multi-employer union construction world from other job-based benefits for both health and retirement.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've been the trust fund administrator, top guy up in the trust fund office since 2018, but you've been around our funds for a lot longer. When did you get your start? How did you get your start here at 103? Tell me a little bit about that.
It's kind of a funny story arc. A million years ago, when dinosaurs still roamed the earth, I was a telephone lineman, and Ma Bell put me through college. I didn't have a college degree when I went to work there, and I was setting poles and running cable. They didn't want to use my degree, and I ended up going into public accounting. I liked numbers. I liked what public accounting was doing, so I became an auditor, and one of my first clients was actually auditing the trust funds here at Local 103. And a few other construction locals in the area, not electrical workers. So I got experience and exposure to what was happening at these offices and really, really liked it, really fell in, really liked the people, really liked the idea of the mission. As things continued, I ended up leaving public accounting and going on into a finance career, and some things changed here at the funds office. Rich Gambino was the administrator, and they needed some help dealing with their auditor and getting things ready for their auditor. So they reached out, and I came on in a consulting basis, helping them really just at audit time to get their records ready and presentable for audit. We worked that way for probably 3 or 4 years, and then we figured there were some other things that I could do and other ways that I could help out. And that continued to increase until 2011. Rich invited me to come on and got the trustees' approval, brought me on as the chief financial officer, really with a focus on putting some systems in place and standardizing some of the ways that the trust funds office did things so that when one participant came in, they would have the same experience as another participant asking for the same thing. We really thought that was going to be the end of it, thought I'd head off into my career in finance. I, again, continued to just love it more and more and more. When Rich announced his desire to retire, in 2017, he worked with the trustees, worked with me, and they invited me to come on as administrator at that time. So it's been 7 years now, and I've never been happier. I really do love what I do here.
That's I want to just give kind of a testament to Rich Gambino's kind of foreseeing the future of this fund and the importance of it. For years and years, it was just electricians running a pension fund, running a healthcare fund. And as the fund grew and it got more complex, noticed that we probably should have a professional on staff. And then, your experience on the fund was a natural fit. Obviously, you've gained the support of not only the trustees, but certainly the members of Local 103. Kind of as a follow-up, for the folks that don't know, we know how important healthcare is. We know how important our pensions are. And when we have questions, folks call the trust fund office. But what does a trust fund administrator do? What is that job and that role?
So, yeah, that's one of those ones. It's taken a long time to really develop that answer to when somebody asks, so what do you do? I'm an administrator. It doesn't really ring complete to most of the people that you speak with. So the trust funds office exists to collect contributions from the employers and pay and provide the benefits to the participants in the various plans. I, as the administrator, am hired by the trustees to run that office on a day-to-day basis. So I'm the executive for that office. We have a great staff of 19 people who work really hard to put those benefits in place and make sure that the money comes in from the contractors the way that it should.
Absolutely. Very complex job. I summed it up pretty good there. One time a year, I think is like probably the most important time of year. It's in February when the deferred income with the annuity statements come out, and I get a lot of feedback on your job.
I'm sure you do. A lot of people do.
I know a lot of people do. That is probably the most important week of the year. Is what did the annuity statements return rate of return be for the year prior to. The plan year ends November 30th.
Correct.
And tell me a little bit about the process on how you calculate that, why it takes 3 months, and it's pretty complex, and most people don't understand.
Yeah, it's the beauty of a plan like ours. So our deferred income plan, annuity plan, is 100% trustee directed. That's why our participants don't have to go in and choose which funds it's going to be invested in. And so it's trustee directed, and it's only valued one time per year, at least one time per year, but one time per each and every year at year end on November 30th. Our plan is invested to provide the maximum benefit across most participants, right? So some younger folk are going to want a more aggressive mix. Folk closer to retirement are going to want a less aggressive mix. We realize that we're covering 9,000 people across all stages of their career and into retirement. So we want to provide the best answer for the most people across the longest period of time. So our deferred income plan is invested 50% in what's called a stable value plan. It's basically bond backed, and it earns a guaranteed return of between 2 and 3.5% per year, depending on what the underlying bonds do. Another 30, that's easy enough to value. We know what that is at the end of the day on November 30th. Another 35% of it is invested in equities. We know what the value are at the end of the day. And they're invested there to capture some of the upside in the market. If you're having a good year in the stock market, the deferred income plan doesn't want to be left out of the party, so to speak. The stable value is designed to provide downside protection for the years when the stock market doesn't do as well. It's really the last 15% of the plan that causes the most of the difficulty in getting a valuation put together. 5% of that's in international equity. Again, that's a quick one. But the 10% that's invested in real estate, and these are real estate investments that have great responsible contractor language, meaning they're using union labor to do their building and to manage their enterprises and to manage the buildings that they have. Their fund is not valued until December 31st. And 10% doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a $1.6 billion fund. So we're talking about $160 million. We want to make sure they get that number right. They give us that valuation at the end of December. It takes them a week or so after the end of December to give us a valuation, which really puts us on a 4-week timeline for when those statements come out. During that 4 weeks, we go through and we make sure what everybody's balance is, what they received in contributions, what they took out in distributions, where things sit. We make sure we got all those pieces right. Then we do the math on what we actually returned, so we know what those balances were, we know what we earned, and then we do the division because the deferred income plan is, the income is allocated to everybody pro rata. So if your balance is 10 times what my balance is, you get 10 times the return that I do, and that's really how that works. So we have to go through that entire process. That all gets done right around the last week in January or so, and then we stop and we take a beat, we take a look at it, step back on it the next day, make sure nothing broke, make sure everything works on the way through. We look at a few test cases, and then we run it. And after that, it's just a week of production. We crank out 9,000 statements. We print those in-house. We don't want to put that out to anybody else. It's got everybody's hours on it for the year, so they know what work went into that year, what those contributions were. We include a statement letter from one of our consultants that talks about each one of those investments and how they performed during the year and what affected their performance during the year. And then we get them out in the mail in early February. So it's a few moving parts, along with January in the accounting world is a busy time. That's when our 1099s go out. That's when our annual reporting needs to go out for withholdings. There's a few moving parts happening in the trust fund's office in January.
Amazing amount of work.
It is.
So I know the overall trust funds, but we're focusing on the annuity right now, the deferred income. What's the total value of the deferred income fund as of the end of last year?
So the end of last year was $1.6 billion, and the deferred income plan was about 9,300 participant balances because, again, retirees, former spouses, beneficiaries can maintain their balances in there, so that's why there's 9,300, which is more than we have in our other plans.
Just to spit out 93 separate account balances for February on a 1.6, almost $2 billion fund in 2.5 months or so, or less really, about a month and a half. Completely, totally complex operation, and the fact that you guys do it so well, like hats off to you. I know.
The stakes are high. That's one we don't want to
No
make a
doubt.
mistake on.
Yeah.
We do not want to send you or any participant a letter that
Yep.
doesn't agree with what actually happened. So,
So
that's measure twice, cut once.
right. We have lots of electricians and technicians and apprentices, of course, that care about their balances, care about their funds. But a lot of them have a couple different jobs that they do. A lot of them are lunchtime lawyers and financial experts, and everybody says, well, my personal fund did X. Why did we only do Y? My wife's account or my spouse's account did this and did that. Can you focus a little bit more on the goal of the deferred income in the investment strategy, why we are as conservative as we are?
Sure.
I think it's important for people to kind of know that we're not a high-risk fund.
So rule number one is don't lose the money, right? That's really where we're at. I never want to be in a position when somebody comes in and says they're retired and I need the money now. Can I have my dollar? And I have to look at them and say, that's great, but I can only give you 96 cents. So we really don't want to be in a position where we're experiencing losses. The Deferred Income Fund began in 1970, and since then we've had 6 periods of negative returns, only 6. And one of those was the mid-year valuation in 2020 during the pandemic, and even that was only a half a point. One other one was less than 1%. One of them was obviously in 2008. Those only been 6. At the same time, the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 have had between 16 and 18 periods of negative returns. If you have $1 and lose 10%, you're sitting on 90 cents. If you then make 10% the next year, you're sitting on 99 cents. So even though you lost 10% and gained 10%, you're still 1% behind where you're at. Losses hurt. Losses hurt over the long term. They take a long time to come back. So our fund is specifically designed to avoid those losses, yet still participate in the upside, and that's the 35% of the equity. Yes, to all of those people, I completely agree. They could go out and be in an aggressive stock-based fund and get a better number a lot of the time. Let me rephrase that. They could get a bigger number a lot of the time. It could be a bigger positive number. It could also be a bigger negative number. That's not the position. That's not the design of our fund. The deferred income plan was put in place to be a supplement to the pension plan itself. So trying to preserve that capital, trying to make sure the money is there when people need it, trying to make sure that it's doing the best for people in all phases of their career, whether they're brand new apprentices or whether they're 20-year retirees who've been collecting a pension for a while and need that to supplement their pension at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people, I think, don't understand, too, the way our calendar year for the deferred income or the annuity is different than the other funds and different than maybe other people's investment funds. And that sometimes has a lag effect or, a jump effect, right?
Yeah, the calendar is funny. Our deferred income plan year runs from December 1st to November 30th each year. Most of the earnings that you see announced, the corporate earnings, the stock earnings, they're very focused on 12/31. That's what all of us as individual taxpayers have as our year end. That's what the majority of corporations have as their year end, is that 12/31. So a lot of people really gear toward that. At 11/30, we miss out on, whether it's good or bad, some of that push toward year end. And it's now that December activity becomes the beginning of our next year, and that's our jumping off point and where we go from. We've absorbed that way. As I said, I've audited other funds. I've had some with February or June or September year ends. It really just depends on where you're at, what day, what month, what cycle we're in. You'll get a different number. Many of the larger public retirement systems have a June 30th year end because they align with the states. A lot of the states have a June 30th year end. And so they've all been releasing their returns lately. And a lot of the schools have them come in over the summer, colleges and endowments and things like that we look at. They come in over the summer and get those results coming through the summer. So we're seeing a lot of those now. People will remember those come February, and then they'll be comparing them. Usually those numbers that are getting announced are the returns on their retirement plans, which are generally invested a little bit more aggressively than something like the deferred income plan.
Sure. The calendar year is the calendar year. Everybody thinks everything starts on January 1st, but in the accounting world, it could be November 30th, it could be June 30th, it could be all over the map, kind of. People do it quarterly. Some people do it semi-annually. We do it once annually. That's just an accounting practice that's kind of common throughout. Some stuff that it took me a while to realize, to kind of understand why we do the things we do. And I think a lot of our members don't understand because they're seeing their private investments and that are different than ours, and why the investment strategy is different or the dates are different, and why is my money here look different at the end of the year than my money over here. So what is some of the most common questions that you get from members about any of the trust funds, about the trust funds in general?
So it's funny. I'm going to start by giving a shout out to my staff. My staff handles the vast majority of all the questions that come in. And I'll answer that question initially for them. It's about hours. It's about eligibility, because that's the today matter. That's I went to the hospital. I needed to. I'm sick. I'm hurt. My wife is sick or hurt. My kid is sick or hurt. I need to make sure that that's covered. Am I going to be okay? Those are the questions that we get most of. We send letters out to every single person who's had any contributions to the plan during a quarter to let them know how they're going to do for eligibility for the upcoming quarter. So there's a lot of communication around that. That's where most of the questions come in. People don't understand it. They don't understand how the credits work. They don't understand what these pieces are going to mean. So that's most of what we get. Second list is claims, health claims. We process and pay our own claims. Why did this get paid at this rate? Why didn't this get paid? My doctor said something didn't get paid. We deal with a lot of those questions. Personally, usually by the time somebody gets to me, I've already got an answer. They're either looking for more clarification, they'd like to disagree with it, they want to understand why a policy is in place in a certain manner. So my questions are a little bit more nuanced. They take a little bit more time to answer. What I love is that they've already, invariably, they give me the answer that they got from one of my staff. I'm like, well, okay, first I'm going to agree with what they told you, but now let's talk about why and where those pieces go. What I enjoy about those is sometimes the answer is still not what the person wants to hear, but what I enjoy about it is they understand, and then we come up with a plan for how to get them to where they need to go, whether it's a retirement question or a claims question or something like that. We do the very best we can to get them somewhere that's going to make sense.
Right. Great segue to my next question, for questions that you get. The eligibility letters. It seems to be a touchy subject for everybody. We never had to do this in the past. Why do we have to do it now? My hours don't change with the same contractor forever, and never did this before. Why we do this now? Why do you have to check my hours? Love to hear just a common sense, whatever the reason is why we have to do it. I think the members would appreciate to know how important that eligibility letter is, and why we need to keep up with it, and why we need to even get the letter or answer the letter.
So I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about the way we used to do it.
Yeah.
We used to look at eligibility on a monthly basis. So the hours that you worked in August, we're in August right now, determined your eligibility for the month of August. Your employer doesn't actually remit those hours to us, send those hours to us, or report those hours to us until the middle of September. So if we found out that you didn't have enough hours in August, we didn't even know about it until at least the middle of September. That's when they're due. We would wait another week or two until the end of the month. Maybe you had hours with another employer. Maybe you had some sick time in there. Maybe something was going to get you, if you were short, was going to get you there. If you had enough, that was fine. It wasn't going to bother anything. If you were short, we would then reach out in the beginning of October and say, hey, Lou, we only got 100 hours from you. You're supposed to have 144. By law, we got to give you 30 days to respond to that letter. So that letter went out at the beginning of October. Now it's the beginning of November. My office, I know, sends out a ton of mail. All of your EOBs come through, so maybe that letter got buried somewhere. People wouldn't see it, and then we would terminate their coverage because they didn't have the required hours. So now we're terminating their coverage in the beginning of November all the way back to August 1st. That certainly drove participants nuts because they now are looking at it going, what do you mean I haven't been covered for I've always worked, all the things that you just said. Then they would call, and we'd have to go through it. Now we got to find their pay stubs for August. Got to ask them to find their pay stubs for August. Now with it being online, it's much easier. But they would have to go through manually and find their pay stubs for August to make sure that we had the right answer, right? That's always our first question. Do we have it right? Did somebody key in 28 hours instead of 82 hours on a specific job? And that's ultimately what's causing you to be short. So when we did that, we would terminate the coverage, and then we would fix it, right? They had the hours. Somebody keyed it wrong. They had flex time available. So we would then have to go back and fix August. It drove the participants nuts. It drove the networks nuts. It drove my office nuts because they had to do the work twice. So we've moved to quarterly coverage. What quarterly coverage does is everybody's on the same calendar quarter. So January, February, March, first quarter. The work that someone does during January, February, and March provides for their coverage during the third quarter of July, August, and September. And the reason there's a delay there is, again, we don't know about those March hours until April 15th. We'd be in the same boat if we were using January, February, March hours to provide April coverage. We'd be behind. We'd already be into the period before we knew somebody was short. So that's why we put that extra piece forward. The other thing that does is that allows us to send a letter to every single person who had contributions come in, so they now know definitively if they had enough hours. Most of those letters go out and say, you had enough hours. We send out approximately 6,000, about 5,500 letters each quarter. And 90% of those have enough hours and are enrolled in the plan, don't need to do anything about it. It's those other 10%. Now we're doing it ahead of the time. We're going to send that first quarter letter out in the first week in May. It's about their coverage to begin on July 1st. So they got 7 weeks before that period ever hits. They're not going to find out at 9 o'clock at night at the pharmacy that somehow their coverage got terminated when our office isn't available to fix the problem. They've got 7 weeks to go through, check those pay stubs, see what it was. It's funny because I get those calls all the time. The same thing you said. They always start with how long they've been a member, which is great, but it doesn't affect the 3 months in question or the month in question. Usually we go through and they're like, oh, I always work. Okay. Oh, yeah, I took a vacation, or I went to my brother's wedding, or I missed a few days, or there was a snowstorm and the job site was shut down, or whatever it was. Those things happen. And we have a number of ways to continue to provide coverage going through that period, so people don't need to write a check. But people do take it personally when they get those letters. And I wish I could write that letter. I don't know if I should use a comic font or something like that so that maybe they won't take it so personally, but I feel for them invariably. Going through that process, when I explain it the way that I just explained it to you, people understand and they appreciate it. The reason we can't do things like automatically apply flex hours and things like that, that's the second biggest question we get, is what if there's a mistake? If there's a mistake and we automatically apply flex hours, that's going to handle your health coverage. It's not going to put those hours into your deferred income plan. It's not going to put those hours into your pension plan. It's not going to put those hours into the Labor Management Fund or the JATC or all the other places that are dependent upon those hours and need those hours to be correct. Mm-hmm. So the individual who does the work is the best one to tell us what hours they work. So this is our method of once a quarter instead of once a year on the deferred income statement, reaching out and saying, this is what we have for hours from you. Is it right?
Right. And going quarterly, we're actually sending out less letters and being less intrusive into people's lives, whatever,
and it's predictable. Every single person gets a letter every quarter, whether they had enough hours or they didn't have enough hours. Under the monthly system, they only got a letter if they didn't have enough hours. So you might have got a letter for December because you were short in December, and then Sean got one for January because he was short in January, and I got one for February because I was short in February. Any job box talk or any talk here at the parking lot or at the union meeting, oh, did you get a letter? We all would have said no to each other regardless of when we asked. Now, by sending all the letters to everybody at the same time, our hope is that there'll be some level of talk about, did you get a letter? And then you should know to go look for that letter and make sure, because that really is the best way to alert people is when they're talking about it.
Yeah. And whether we're bidding jobs or whether we're talking about benefits, we're an hourly-based system. Everything depends on how many hours you worked. Your health coverage, your pension, everything, your annuity statements, everything is hourly-based. And we just got to keep track of the hours that people are working or not working, and that's a great explanation on why those letters go out, because I know we get a lot of questions on that. On healthcare, now that we're talking about healthcare and health coverage and eligibility, it's one of the most prized possessions that Local 103 members have is the Cadillac of Cadillac plans is our health. And never hear anybody complain about health, but everybody that's under our plan has heard a horror story from a friend that's in another business or another trade or another industry about how much it costs to have a family plan, how much their deductibles are, and how much they have to, whether it's a copay or deductible, whatever it is. Everybody hears a horror story. Our plan, we haven't had an increase in 14 years. Unheard of. Absolutely unheard of. So going on 15 years, because next year we've already allocated money for next year, right, and there's no allocations for health. Mm-hmm. Tribute to your office, you, your staff, the trustees, everybody that makes that happen. With the cost increases that we're seeing in health every year, and it looks like it's just going to get worse, and it's going to continue to be as bad as it's been. How do we keep the level and the benefit of health that we have for our members? How do we keep it in this world without increasing the contribution rate like we have?
So there's a couple of factors that I certainly can't take credit for that are helping us to be able to be there for as long as we have. When the changes were made in 2011, I was here full time. The health plan, I was the CFO. The health plan was hemorrhaging. It was bleeding $1.6 million each and every month out of reserves. We were down to, I think, a 9-month reserve at the time. And things were a little bit dire. At that point in time, we'd been experiencing 25 and 50 cent increases in the health plan each and every contract increment. So that was September and March. Each and every year, more money was going into that health plan. Negotiations were happening in 2011, and there was a lot of talk about it during that time. So it was put on us. Rich Gambino was the administrator. I was the CFO, and we worked with the consultant to say, what do we need to do? Ultimately, we made a decision that we needed $26 million a year. We'll find a way to get $13 million a year, save $13 million a year, and move forward, see where that gets us. In doing that, circumstances around it, the couple of years prior to that, had unusually high medical expenses. So some of our assumptions for what was going to go forward didn't come through. We're a fully self-funded plan. So if we have 7 people who end up needing astronomical amounts of care for huge amounts of money, we pay that. We don't have an insurance carrier backing us up. We don't have stop-loss insurance backing us up. So that comes out of our reserves.
Talk about that one for 1 second. What self-administered, self-insured means.
Yeah.
Everybody's heard that, but most people don't know what that means. What does that mean? Like what?
So I'll do it in reverse. So actually, the health plan started in 1950. First benefits were paid in 1952. It was a fully insured plan, and the people at the time recognized the need for health insurance, and that was novel at the time. By 1955, they had taken a look and said, we want to self-fund this benefit. So what does self-funding mean? If you're in an insured group, and there's 1,000 people in this room, and the insurance company thinks you're going to spend $100,000 covering the people in this room, they think that's what the medical expenses are going to be. And there's a similar room next door with another 1,000 people in it. They think they're only going to spend $90,000 covering those people. Maybe they're younger, maybe they're healthier, anything like that. Well, they can't use the money they collect from us to pay their benefits, and they can't use the money they collect from them to pay our benefits. So they charge us $110,000 just to make sure we don't spend any of the other room's money, and they charge that room $99,000 or some number like that to make sure that we don't spend any of their money. So you're automatically looking at that premium, and that's really where that word comes from, that extra money that's tied up sitting with the insurance company. It's not gone. You're going to get to use it when the contract wraps up or you move on. It's insurance on the insurance is exactly correct. By just taking that off the table, now instead of spending $110,000 a year, we're spending just the $100,000 a year in medical expenses. Now, some years that might only be 92. Other years it might be 104. So those are the things that we look at. That's what self-funded means. That means we are on the hook for all our own expenses. We pay our own bills. Many self-funded plans will put a ceiling in place, and you can get this limited insurance that they call stop-loss insurance that hits the top end of that. So if you have one or a few claimants, specific individuals who need a lot of care, and it gets very expensive, the insurance will kick in to help smooth out some of those flows. Again, you're paying a premium. You're paying to take some risk off the table by paying a regular monthly amount in case you have those big bills. If you have reserves, as our plan does, it's a better use of your money just to pay those bills when they come, because when that money's sitting in our account, we're earning on it. We're getting the benefit of having it there. We're able to use it to pay our bills rather than having it sit someplace else. So that's what self-funded means. It means we have to eat whatever those are, and we want to be in a position to do that. That's why we exist. Self-administered is the other side of that coin. Self-administered means our trustees make the decisions on what we cover, how we cover it, how much we cover it, what the benefits are going to be, what the reimbursement rates are going to be. Those things all happen by our trustees, as opposed to by some committee at some insurance company somewhere who doesn't know the members of Local 103. Certainly not as well as any of the union reps or any of the management reps, people that they work for. They know who these people are. They know what the benefits are going to be used for, and we can design and tailor a better plan of benefits to our participants by being self-administered.
Yeah, the other thing is too that the benefit of being self-administered, self-insured, that I've always carried with me and always explained was you can call somebody in this building, or you can come down and see somebody in person. You're not talking to somebody in India or somebody across the country who closes up shop or goes to lunch for 2 hours. There's always going to be somebody at our office to answer your questions about our plan and knows the intimate details of how our plan is structured. I always thought that that was so important, and it's such a value. You hear stories about other trades, other building trades, for instance, that are close to our model, pretty much the same, that are going to insurance companies now and not being self-funded and self-insured, getting away from that. Is that a trend that you're seeing? And do you think that's like kind of problematic, or that's where we'll end up, or what do you think the reason is for some of that is?
So ultimately, a lot of that is a size game. Unless you have critical mass, it's very difficult to take in enough contributions and maintain a sufficient reserve to be able to handle those large expenses when they come through. Smaller locals, smaller groups, it's an easier bet because they have less coming in contributions, and now they're worried about what does the monthly look like, right? So we all joke about it when you buy a car. We all did it. When we were young, we didn't care what the big price at the end of the name was for the car. We just needed to know what the monthly payment was going to be and were we going to be able to afford it. That's what a lot of those locals are seeing, certainly the smaller locals. That's how they're working. It's a fully insured benefit. Can they afford the monthly payment? And if they can, they can. If they can't, they have to modify their benefits. Our plan is a little bit more mature that way. We have that many more hours. We have that many more people working in it. We're carrying 20,000 lives. So we got our 8,000 participants who are active members who are covered under the plan and 12,000 dependent children and spouses. So there's 20,000 lives that we're bringing to the table. That allows us a little bit of bargaining power with the networks. And because we're working so many man hours, 10.4 million in 2024 at that $13 an hour, there's enough money coming in and there's enough money in reserves that we can afford to pay those bills, and we get some time, we get some runway before we need to make some changes. I don't see us moving to a fully insured benefit. There's a reason the trustees moved away from it in the early 50s. I don't see us moving there in that direction absent something catastrophic, because again, we'd be tying up more of our money, and we have it. We have the ability to do it. And I'm certainly going to continue to do everything in my power to keep it from being other than self-funded and self-administered, because of the belief I have that that's the best answer for everybody here.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think obviously the trustees all agree with being self-funded and self-insured. Why it's so important. So if we're self-funded and self-insured, why? What's Blue Cross's role? Because I'm sure they'd love to have all our business. What role do they play in us being self-funded and self-insured?
So the short answer is I could print out a card that says Lou's covered by the local 103 health benefit plan.
We used to have that card.
Lou could go into his doctor's. His doctor's going to go, am I going to get paid? They have no idea. So then they're going to make a phone call and say, hey, who's Lou? Who are you, by the way, Mike? And why do I know that you're going to pay me? By carrying that Blue Cross card, it provides a level of comfort for the provider. The provider knows what they're going to get paid. They know when they're going to get paid. They know what their reimbursement rate's going to be. They know how to check eligibility for the person. So we pay a fee to Blue Cross to basically rent their network. They don't like it when I phrase it that way, but that's really all we're doing. If we're renting their network, that gains them some familiarity. We do the same thing with CVS Caremark for our prescription drug coverage, Delta Dental for our dental plan, Davis Vision, Versant Health for our vision care plan. We work with those networks, and that's why we carry all those separate cards so that the providers will recognize them and provide you the benefits that you do when you go in there and you need services.
So by being a member or being affiliated with Blue Cross or Dental or Delta or CVS, we're buying a discount?
Yep.
Are we buying a discount? So it's kind of like Costco for health insurance almost, right?
So when Blue Cross goes in to negotiate with a certain provider for what they're going to, so the sticker price is $100 for whatever service it is, and Blue Cross says, you know what, we've got 1 million members in Massachusetts, but we're only going to give you $75. If you want to be in our network, we'll give you $75. Well, as a provider, you're looking at it going, well, I could chase every patient who comes into my office and have to send them bills and hope however many you're going to pay me and go through all these pieces. Or I could sign on to this Blue Cross network, and without as much headache, I know I'm going to get paid $75 for each one of these things that I do from Blue Cross directly, and they'll sort out how they're getting paid and work through it from there. That's what the advantage is to the provider. So we let Blue Cross do that negotiating for us, or any of these networks do that negotiating for us. It gets a better deal for us. Part of what we do for paying the rent for that network is we get that lower reduced reimbursement rate.
Yeah, it's a great benefit, great way to buy down the costs. I was on a job site recently. There was probably 50 103 members on the job. And I asked the guy, I kind of polled the audience, so to speak, who here has been in the local for 15 years or less, and who's been in the local 15 years or more. And half the room has been here, less than 15 years, never lived through take $1 out of wages, take 50 cents out of wages, or take money out of your next raise to put it in health. I was here, just got out of my time when they collapsed the holiday vacation fund because health, and at the time, health went to $5 an hour, I think. And then it seemed like in a short amount of time, we went from 5 to 7 to 10 to 13. Mm-hmm. It's crazy. Half the local remembers that. Half the local never been through that. Someday we're going to have to go back to making sure we're well funded. Talk about the funding levels where we are now for the health, because we know it's exorbitant what the costs are out there. Where's our funding levels at? Where's our reserves at? How do we build that reserve? If you can talk a little bit about that and give people some comfort, hopefully, of where we've been. It's because it's important. I think it weighs on people.
So our health plan, we currently have approximately, as of last plan year end, we had approximately $460 million in assets. Last plan year, we spent $160 million directly on benefits. Quick maths.
$160 million.
$160 million.
Benefits.
And benefits alone, not network fees, just claims.
That's actual checks written coming out of this building.
Yep. Well, we pay them through Blue Cross, but yes.
Right.
For direct medical, prescription drug, vision, all that care, that's that number.
160.
There's numbers on top of that for the admin fee that we pay to Blue Cross to rent their network and CVS to use their network. Those are on top of that. It's $160 million in direct benefits. So if we have 460, we've got approximately 3 years of reserves in place. So if no dollars came in for contributions, work suddenly went to zero. We've got 3 years of being able to do what we're doing right now, the same way we're doing it right now with no money coming in the door. Again, that assumes that there's no increase, right? So is it a little less than 3 years? Absolutely, because we know they're going to increase. So the plan is extremely well funded. We know that work isn't going to zero. If the work even goes to half, that reserve period gets that much longer. So the math is a little bit conservative on that. That's piece one. Piece two is the trustees are always looking at what this is. When we put these changes in place in 2011, and we saw what they did, and as I said, we were operating on the backs of 2008, 9, and 10. We actually had some very high claims expenses, and we thought that was trend. Turns out that those were aberrant years. Those were aberrantly high years. So coming through 2012, 13, and 14, the trend did not continue. So the changes that were made actually did what they needed to do. We thought we were probably going to need to start looking at increasing the contribution rate sometime 2019, 2020, 2025. Because that snowball was rolling downhill, because those investments continued to earn money, because the trustees continued their excellent stewardship of this fund, we continue to work with our vendors, we continue to bargain with our vendors, we continue to provide coverage that we want, the way we wanted to, in the way that we needed to. We haven't had to do that. We haven't had to hit that increase button, and we're still in a 3-year reserve period. Is that going to go on forever? No, absolutely not. When we went to $13 an hour at 144 hours a month, that's $1,872 a month. Generally, we plan on that being for family plan coverage. That also supplements our retirees, and that also covers our unemployed while they're out of work.
Two very important pieces that nobody else does.
Huge piece. No, nobody does that. There's hour banks. Maybe you get 6 months out of it. When you retire, maybe you get to run out your hour bank, and that's it.
How people soon forget that, no matter if you're unemployed, you're ready, willing, and able to go to work, you're covered. You're retired, you're covered. Huge.
And those were
shock to the industry when you talk about that stuff. People take a second and say, well, you do what for your retirees? You carry your unemployed for how long? Huge benefit.
My colleagues, my peers in other funds, in other places, not just electrical workers, but other they're absolutely mystified that that's something we're able to do.
Great pride for this local, absolutely.
So including in that in the 1872, I think at that time, the Kaiser Family Foundation does a lot of great medical research. They're somehow affiliated with Kaiser Permanente, which is a large, highly integrated healthcare system on the West Coast. They also have some great research. I think at the time, the average family plan was about $1,600 a month all in. So we were like $272 a month higher than them. We comforted ourselves with the fact that we had come through some tough years and we were providing coverage for our laid off and our unemployed and supplementing the coverage for our retirees. As of 2023, I think it was, the Kaiser Family Foundation's research, the average family plan in the United States was approximately $2,400. That average family plan includes those plans with a high deductible, which they do to get a lower premium, higher copays than we have, tiered or limited networks, so that this hospital costs you more than this hospital, or you can go to this hospital, but you can't go to this hospital. Some of those don't even have out-of-network benefits. So a lot of those, in order to get a lower premium, they slice off a lot of coverage. Those low premiums are included in that average. So by that time, we are now $400 less than the average family plan in the country. That can't continue forever. We're in Boston. It's an expensive place. The other thing that benefits us by being in Boston is the entire world travels here for medical care. That's great. There's people who want to come do work here as providers, as doctors. They want to come learn here. They want to come experience here. They want to come do the things that they do here. That both helps us and hurts us. It helps us in that there's a supply. There's a lot of supply. There's a lot of people eager to do it, and we get the best medical care.
We build all those hospitals too.
That's a huge benefit.
Right.
The other side of that is there are VVIPs who fly in from all over the world who pay sticker price in cash because wherever they're from doesn't do insurance. So your bargaining power goes away a little bit for how much of a discount you're going to be able to get. But that marketplace, our curve is a little flatter than other places because we're on the leading and bleeding edge of a lot of these medical cares and a lot of these things like that. So they're doing them here first. When people aren't sure of them, they're not charging as much for them. Well, if I only charged $100 for it last year and it worked, and now it's commonplace, it's a little hard to go back and charge $125 for it next year. Maybe you get $104, but so we benefit from all of those just by being here. But the time is going to come that we're going to have to look at that, and we're going to either have to tailor our benefits or change our contributions.
Yeah. Staying on the cost piece. So costs are every year. We talk about how they're going up every year, and our contribution rate has stayed the same. We're well funded. We have a great reserve. Credit to the trustees and to the administrator and our consultants. And I'll get to the trustee piece in a minute. But how does our fund? How do you manage our fund at the same rate of income coming in? Costs are increasing, and we still increase benefits for our members. Like, talk about some of those increases and how that relates to the kind of everything's got a price tag on it. Whenever we talk about benefits, well, we bring an actuary in to tell us what that's going to cost. Talk a little bit about some of those changes we made, changing benefits up, and how that all adds into the factors of how we cost things.
So Local 103 has grown. In the 15 years that I've been here, we've gone from 4,000 some odd participants to roughly 6,000 participants. Well, that's a 50% increase in participants over that period of time. Also at that time, we increased the minimum eligibility from 125 hours per month to 144 hours per month. All those things brought more money into the fund, greater working hours. We worked 10.4 million hours last year. We hadn't worked, until we got into the early 2020s, we hadn't worked hours like that since the big dig and the power plants were going on in the early 2000s. So that funds a lot of it. That $13 an hour at a greatly increased Local 103 in general, that's something we could not have factored on in 2011 when we made those changes. In 2011, there was 1,800 people on the out-of-work list who were receiving all the care without the contributions coming in, and we don't want to make any changes in that. So that was factored in. When that math changes, when that balance changes, it affords us the ability to do some things. There's no sense in having a health plan with a 10-year reserve. That money should be going to benefits. Something should be happening with that money. Either we shouldn't be taking it out of people's paychecks and it should be going into the envelope instead of coming into contributions, or we should be providing a better suite of benefits. So coming through this, we have improved benefits over time. The most recent one was we doubled the dental benefit. It used to be $1,000 calendar year max, and now it's a $2,000 calendar year max. And people seem, obviously, they're happy with that. Or they're happier about that. There's always somebody who wants it to be $2,500, and I understand, especially I'm old enough that it's not me personally, but we're in the root canal years in my house, and those are expensive. So, people would always like to see it higher. But $2,000 does a lot to go that way. In the beginning, April of 2023.
That's per person.
That's per
in your
person.
household.
In the house. For each person in the household, right? I got 4 kids. Well, 3 of them still on the plan. So for the 5 of us, it's $2,000 a piece. So that's a big jump potentially for the health plan.
Especially when you got braces and you got, like you said, root canals and fillings and a lot of cavities and a lot of sugar.
The reason it didn't necessarily double our spend is not everybody uses that.
Sure.
And the other thing is we never applied that maximum to routine preventative care. If somebody spent their entire max getting a root canal in January, we still want them to go for their 2 cleanings for the year, because that's an indicator of overall health, is what's going on in your mouth, as well as the plan's just going to spend more and more money. If you're skipping your routine maintenance and routine checkups just to do the big things, you're going to need more of those big things. So we exempted those to begin with. So those were paid for anyways. So that's part of the reason that it didn't double. And then there's other people who they go for their 2 checkups and that's all they spend.
Yeah. The lady at my dentist office always, don't leave yet, copay. And they're shocked that we don't have a copay when you do your cleanings and stuff like that. So it's, oh, you don't have a copay. And they double check and triple check, and they're like, oh, you've got great insurance. Oh, thank you very much.
Well, and that's a great example of where self-administered benefits. Delta Dental did not have, we had our own network. We didn't have a network. We paid all those claims in-house until 2017. We signed on with Delta Dental. And basically what we did with them at the time is said, this is what we're spending each year on the dental plan now. I don't want to reduce that. I just want that, I'll say it was $50 million. It wasn't, but $50 million. We want that number to go further. We don't want to take any more money out of the participants. We don't want to increase their exposure. We want to get them better benefits for the same spend. So our structure with them is a little different, having all those preventative things taken care of, the way that we pay for the maintenance and the repair work, right? So I think of it as preventative, maintenance, and repair are the 3 tiers that happen in that dental side of things. You know, the way that we pay for those maintenance and repair things is at a higher reimbursement rate than most other plans. So even once you get into that, it still works better for the participant.
Yep. Yeah, well, you get great insurance. We're going to do x-rays this time.
But having somebody like Delta in place means they don't get to sort of profiteer off of that, right? Because they're working with Delta. Delta Dental has a policy that you get x-rays every however many years. And the dentist knows that because they're in the network and they provide that way. When we're paying for it off a schedule, an unscrupulous provider could have said, well, Lou needs x-rays every 9 months.
Yeah, right.
I'm certainly not in a position to deny that. So that's why we leverage the professionals.
Yeah. So you mentioned a few different times, you mentioned the word trustees. The trustees manage the fund. But trustees talk about that dynamic a little bit. There's half union trustees, there's half management trustees. Talk about that dynamic a little bit. I mean, the union, we're electricians, right? I wasn't going to go to school to manage a health fund or a pension plan or finance. And contractors, the management side of the trustees, they're running their businesses. They're busy doing that. No one's given 100%. I mean, that's part of the reason why we have you. But talk about the trustee dynamic and how we rely on the information we get to make those decisions and your input, our consultants' input, that type of thing. Talk about that.
Absolutely. I'll back up a little bit because I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand it. You know, we talk about the trustees. We are what's called Taft-Hartley multi-employer plans. Taft-Hartley, named after the sponsors of the Labor Relations Act of 1938, I think it was. And they ultimately decided that the pendulum had swung. We went from the robber barons in the late 1800s to the unions having all the power in the 1920s. And these two representatives, congressfolk, decided that it made sense to share that responsibility, that what was ultimately good for the employee in the right level, in the right manner, was going to be good for the employer as well. And if both of their interests were aligned, specifically with the provision of benefits, then that was going to be in the best interest of all parties. So it created this labor management relations in the Taft-Hartley Act. So our funds are all jointly trustees, jointly trusteed, equal numbers of union and management trustees on each fund. We currently have 8 on the Pension, Health, and Deferred Income Fund, as well as the JATC, and then 10 on the Labor Management Fund. So all those decisions are always balanced, right? We could say we need the health contribution, we need the best benefits in the world, and everybody's got to have $5,000 a year for dental and all these other things. Well, that's going to make it so that it's so expensive. The contribution rate goes up to $20 an hour now, and they still want to make money in the wage, all these men and women out there working. So now instead of a $105 package, it's going to become a $130 package. And how can an employer go out there and bid work with the $130 package in the current environment, whatever the numbers might be? So that balances all those pieces. And when they come together, they're working together to find that middle ground. And I have to say, I've been experienced with funds here in Boston that I've audited, and I've got colleagues all over the country. The relationship between the two sides of the table at our trust funds meeting is absolutely incredible, regardless of what anybody else has got going on outside of that, whether we're in active contract negotiations, whether whatever's going on in any of these situations. Those trustees come to that table, yourself included, they sit down, they're ready to do trust funds business, and they're leaving all that other stuff outside. And it's been like that the entire time I've been there. How do they actually get the business done? Well, that's one of the things that is very interesting about this environment. If you go to Blue Cross, they hire medical directors and they hire actual people who do these things to make these decisions. What our trustees do, as you pointed out, we've got electricians on one side of the table and owners and representatives, electrical contractors on the other. They know what their business needs are. They know what they do on a daily basis. I'm there on a daily basis doing these things, but we work with a number of outstanding consultants. And the consultants are layered, right? So Blue Cross has some excellent medical people, but we also know that ultimately we're paying them a fee and we're a little bit inventory to them, right? So when they go negotiate with a large hospital system, they say, hey, we're bringing 1 million members and this is what you're getting for exposure. So we're a little bit like what they're selling as opposed to who they're selling to. So we need somebody looking at that. We work with consultants who talk to us about what those increases are going to be. They do separate studies about what they think our increases are going to be, what they think trends are going to be, where they think our spending is going to come in over the course of the next year. On top of that, we have an actuary who goes through, works for a different company entirely, goes through, checks the math. What do they think the progression is going to be? They've got a bunch of other clients. So we're really trying to leverage that experience of all of these people to inform the decisions that we make. That's just on the health plan side. On the pension, it's the same thing. We've got an actuary, we've got an investment consultant. They work very closely together, but they work for different entities. So it's not like when one says yes, the other one says, yeah, that's a great idea, because they're ultimately going to earn a better commission if the two of them agree. They're getting paid separately, they're getting paid fee-based, and they're giving us the answers that we need for our fund. Some of these consultants we've been involved with for a very long time, other ones we haven't been involved with for as long. We've gone through some rotations. When the consultants aren't doing what we need them to do, we rotate, we change, we get out there and we look. That's part of the reason that I stay active in the industry groups that I do and the peer groups that I do. I want to hear what people are using, what they're running into, what they're seeing, and what's going on out there.
Yeah, excellent team that you kind of you're the quarterback or the head coach or whatever of the team, and it's
great folk with me.
Yeah, no doubt. So shifting a little bit to pension, and you talked a little bit about. Our consultants, and we have 50 different entities we use to invest our members' pension money. It's $2 billion in pension funds, and we invest it in all kinds of different places. And we have consultants and we have actuaries that you spoke about. Every year, we put a little money in, we get a little bump in the increase, and that's talk about that a little bit, and then talk about this year. Whether it's a 13th check that we do for current retirees or some big ticket items of changes to the pension. Hey, if it was up to me, the pension multiplier would be 200, but it's not up to me. It's up to our team, and we have some actuaries, and we have some consultants that tell us in a formula to figure out exactly what it is, what we can afford. Can you talk a little bit about that whole dynamic?
Sure. I'll back up a little
Sure.
bit and start with pension fund has approximately $1.8 billion as of the end of last year. The pension fund has a very, very long time horizon. We anticipate that most people are going to work a 30 or 40-year career, depending on when they come in, how young they are when they start, how many hours they're going to work, and all those things. So we're betting that for the long, long term. The pension plan is invested more aggressively than the deferred income plan because it can take some of those negative years because we really want to capture that upside. The pension plan doesn't have that, oh, I'm sorry, Lou, I only have 96 cents out of your dollar to give you today. You're going to get your benefit no matter what it is. So the pension plan has a very different focus. The way the pension plan is structured is, yes, all of those assets are invested by approximately 40 to 50 at any given time, professional money managers. That's what they do. They get a commission. They get a cut of the fees of what they earn. So how do we layer in some protection to make sure that we're not overpaying for that? Those 40 to 50 investment managers, we have a separate investment consultant who has nothing to do, no say, no ownership, no anything with any of those investment management firms. They help us balance our portfolio. They help us decide whether we want 10% of our plan in private equity or private credit or 40% of our plan into equities. And they help us line that up with what our long-term goals are with what they see in the market. The third layer of that is our actuary comes in. They have their own separate set of experience, and they say, is this going to work? They make some assumptions. People are going to work this many hours per year. There are going to be this many people. They're going to earn this many pension credits each and every year. So we look forward 40 years and we say, this is how many dollars we're going to need 40 years from now if all these assumptions hold true. Then they take a look at the money that we're sitting on and they say, okay, we're sitting on $1.8 billion today. If that earns 7% year in, year out over the next 40 years, how many dollars are we going to have? And then how does that number compare with how many dollars we're going to need? We do that exercise each and every year. That gets presented to the trustees. When that number gets low, we talk about what changes we're going to make. When that number gets high, we talk about what benefits we can possibly enhance. As far as when regular benefit changes are made, right, we regularly increase, not every year, but we regularly increase the multiplier by $1 here, a couple of bucks there. And we usually pre-fund that. Last couple of times it's been with a quarter in March for a benefit that's going to increase in November. Ultimately, the process for that is we go to the actuary and we say, okay, we want to increase a benefit. We want to add $1 to the multiplier. What's that going to cost? And the actuary does his math and figures out what that's going to cost. And then we say, okay, cool, we need to put a quarter into the plan to fund that benefit. Now, when the actuary comes through and says it's going to cost 21.3 cents, we put a quarter in. And the reason we do that is to be conservative. We don't necessarily know that we're going to earn 7% each and every year going forward for those next 40 years. We always want to be on the conservative side because we never want to be in a position that a lot of these plans that have had trouble and needed to be bailed out. And effectively, there's somebody like me or you who's had to sit there in front of those participants and go, yeah, you remember that promise we made you? We're not going to be able to keep it.
Yeah, I mean, rates of return have been trending lower too, right?
They have been. Yeah. They have been. Although over the last 5 years, they've been improving steadily, as much as I may or may not be loath to admit it at any point in time. They are doing better against all expectations. So that's how those decisions get made, is we make sure that the funds are there, we make sure that the money is there, we make sure that it's a prudent use of those funds, and it's not going to impact the promises that we've already made. The other thing that's different about our pension plan is most pension plans, contributions are tied more closely to the actual benefit that's received. And the reason I say that they're not in our plan is whenever you started, the contribution rate for pension was not $12.83 an hour. But when you retire, all of your years are going to be at whatever the multiplier is at that time. Most pension plans, if they do it based on a multiplier, those multipliers are in bands. So the years that you worked between 1980 and 1990 are going to be paid out at this band, and the years that you worked from 1990 to 2000 are going to be paid out at this band, because those were the contributions that were in place at that time.
That's a great point. That's a lot of members don't understand that other plans. Why do they get so much? Well, it's only counting a small amount of years.
Right. You know, there's other plans in the area who have much higher multipliers than ours, but they're only for a small amount of years. Somebody retires today, it's $130 for every year that they were here. If their career started in 1985, that means they got 40 years at $130 an hour, not those first 5 years at $50 an hour, the next 10 at 70.
Right. No, great point. Great point.
So that's how we figure that out. You also referenced the enhancements that we made this year. You want me to jump into that?
Please, yeah,
all right.
absolutely.
So the first thing we did was we took a look, and you and I sat down and we said, how can we get some people some access to their retirement? How can we maybe change the shape of things a little bit by getting some people some ability? We hear from a lot of people, unemployment's up. People are like, oh, if I could get my health care, I'd go now. Or
Sure.
if I could get access to the bridge, I'd go now. Or so we sat down.
It's a conversation I think we started having about 6 months ago, right?
Yeah, it was a while ago.
We spent some time on it, yeah.
And you get a lot more of those questions than I get. They're asking about the benefits in place when they talk to me. The what ifs, a lot more of those come to you. So we sat down and we brainstormed and said, you know, kind of how can we remove some barriers to people accessing their pension if the time is right for them and if they want to go? And we came up with really a four-pronged approach to enable people to access their retirement. The first and the easiest one to explain is a $50,000 incentive to retire. You get an extra 50 grand with your first pension payment. That's as simple as that is. It's taxable. It's not something you can roll over because we didn't set it up that way. It's just 50,000 extra dollars that come out with your very first pension payment if you retire between November 1st of 2025 and October 31st of 2026. All of these apply only for that one pension plan year. So that's going to do some things for some people. There's other folk who aren't quite 58 years old yet. Our pension plan has a reduction. If you retire at an age greater than 55 but less than 58, there's a 0.3% reduction in your monthly benefit for every month that you retire early. So if you retired all 3 years early, you'd have a 10.8% reduction in your pension benefit. For this 1 year, we've removed that reduction. We haven't changed our normal retirement age, but we did lower the reduction to zero. So there's not going to be any reduction. So if somebody was 55 and wanted to go now, they could. They'd collect the $50,000. Third thing we did was, as we all know, our pension plan, in order to make a good year, you have to have at least 200 hours in that year. Now, all throughout the 90s, when work was low, the trustees waived that minimum 200-hour requirement. And in 2009 and 10, the trustees waived that 200-hour requirement. Well, other people...
So that 200-hour requirement is just to backfill. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so
people understand what does that mean? What is that?
So a good pension year is 1,400 hours. So think of it as little boxes with lids.
Yep.
And once you've filled the box, the lid closes. You don't need to put any more in there. A full box has 1,400 hours in it. You can't even open the box unless you have at least 200 hours. 200 hours is the key to open the box. Right. So you have all your closed boxes that are full of 1,400 hours. You might have another box that's closed because you haven't unlocked it yet. You've only got 50 hours. This removes the need. For 1 year, you could choose to open a box that had less than 200 hours. You didn't have 200 hours for it. And provided you had all those years that you work a regular full-time year at 40 hours a week for 52 weeks is 2,080 hours. All those years, those extra 600 or so hours that you had, they get used to fill in the years that you didn't have 1,400. Well, now you can fill in 1 year that you didn't have even the 200 to open the year. It just allows people the opportunity to open one more year. Whether their unemployment lasted a little longer in the early 10s, right, and they were still out during 11.
Sure.
Maybe they started experiencing things a little earlier in 2008. The other place that you can use is we have a lot of people who wait until January 1st to retire because they have all the credits in the world. They've got all the hours in the world, but they need to get 200 hours during November and December to open up that next plan year to get another year of multiplier. Other people have it in the beginning of their service career. They're apprentices. They're not sworn in. It takes them a year before they get onto the benefits. Back in the day, that first year, they start in September. So they only have September and October hours as a new apprentice. Maybe they didn't get to 200 that first year. They could fill that year in as well. So that was the third item, is we allowed them to fill in that year. And then the fourth item is a lot of folk who are getting towards that talked about, well, it's the 15 years and 15,000 hours. I'm either good on the years or I'm good on the hours, but I'm not good on both. So
that's to carry health.
Yes,
to carry health in
retirement.
Right.
Yep. Right. So in the retirement, we dropped that to 10,000 hours in 10 years. You have to have those 10,000 hours in your last 10 years. And normally, if you retire with early retirement, you can't retire with health. But during this temporary period, if you retire early retirement, so that's greater than 55, less than 58, you will retire. You will be able to retire with health care provided you're eligible for it with the 10 years and 10,000 hours. So those were the four things that we did. I've done a couple of presentations on it, talked to a lot of people about it. There's a lot of questions, right? Sure. People don't understand how they're all going to work for them. The biggest piece I say to people is make an appointment, come, sit down. Noelle is our pension coordinator. She does a fantastic job. She's extremely well-versed in these. She's had a lot of meetings with a lot of people and explained it through, and she's seen a lot of people and really she has more experience in answering those questions than anybody in our office. But there's kind of two things happening there, right? Taking the best advantage of these temporary pension enhancements isn't the same as getting your maximum retirement. Obviously, your maximum retirement is you work until you literally can't stand up anymore. You're going to have more years. You're going to have more salary. You're going to have more contributions to your deferred income plan. But that's not what anybody wants. We want people to be able to enjoy their time in retirement. So the other side of that is, how do I take the maximum advantage of these temporary incentives? Well, there's a very personal decision between those two, right? Journeyman electrician is currently making 60 some odd dollars an hour. I'm going to say it's 60 because it makes the math easy. At 2,000 hours, that's $120,000 a year. $4,000 a month pension, which is a 30-year pension at $130 an hour, that's 48 grand. So you're 70 grand light to step out of the gate, and you're going to get this incentive payment for 50 grand. Okay, that gets you most of the way there for the first year, and you're going to have to kick in a little bit towards your health care. People should be thinking about that. If it's right for them, that's outstanding. There's some people who, for whatever reason, they need to do it. And that's what it's there for. It gives them some of that access. If you retire at 55, you don't get the bridge. So you're foregoing $1,500 a month in bridge payments, but you're getting $50,000 right away. If you can't wait, need something to change to get to that healthcare number, you can do that now. We get a little bit of access to that at this time.
Sure.
The biggest misconception, and they'd shoot me if I didn't say it, if you retire at age 55, the bridge does not suddenly kick in when you turn 58. The bridge only applies if you retire between age 58, which is our normal retirement age, and age 62. If you retire at age 60, you only get 2 years of bridge payments. You don't get 4 years of bridge payments. It only applies for 58 to 62 when you retire during those times.
Right. So 58 is we consider normal retirement age in our world. In the real world, nobody retires at 58, right? And not all our members retire at 58, right? What's the average age of a retiree at Local 103, knowing that 58 you can get your full pension?
So our average retirement age is actually 61. So people stick around and work 3 years into that bridge. And again, as people's circumstances changes and as our lives change, we're having kids later, we're getting married later, we're buying bigger houses with larger mortgages, and we're doing that later in life. Maybe we're moving a time or two where our parents lived in the same house for as long as we knew them.
Throw in a divorce here or there.
Yeah, throw in a divorce here or there. And then college is the big piece because we had the kids later. We're still paying for college when we get to age 58. And that same math applies, right? Do I want to step away from $120,000 a year to make $50,000 a year if I still have a mortgage payment, some college tuition that I'm fronting, and all these other things? Or I want to do something real nice in my retirement and buy a boat or a second home or anything like that. And really, when you look at it, the ability of an electrician to be able to live that kind of a lifestyle and to know that they're going to be able to afford that kind of a lifestyle into retirement is a real testament to the work that the trustees, the funds have done over all these years to be able to provide that. Sure. They're not scared. You read all the articles. People are worried about how they're going to pay for healthcare, how they're going to pay for this. They're worried about outliving their retirement funds because they're all stuck on just defined contribution. They just have a cash balance. I have $100. I spend $10 a month. That means that I can afford to live for 10 more months. And that's the math people are being forced to do. We're, on the other hand, saying, well, I'm 86 and I get this many dollars per month in my pension, and I know my bills are less than that. I can keep living.
We started having these conversations about making some incentives. It was based around, we have full retirement at 58, yet most don't take it. And, those kind of conversations, hey, I'm 56. If I could go now, obviously healthcare is the biggest thing. If I could go now with healthcare, I'd walk out the door. Some may be just talking, but some, I think, feel that way. It's a tough racket working in Boston, right? Commuting up out of the house before 5 a.m. And, it's not an easy racket. So getting, the conversation with me and you was, how do we get folks to look at and really incentivize taking their retirement? If you're out of work, that's maybe a little easier decision. I'm out of work. I'm 56 or I'm 58. I wasn't going to go, but I might be out for a little while, so might be a good opportunity. I'm going to get 50 grand. That might help bridge me to get wherever I can get. Maybe I can capitalize on the bridge. I know I'm going to have my health care. What's going to take for people to go early? In the early retirement, we talked about the 55. We've always had 55. You could always retire early. The math added up a little bit different, so we made some changes, and it's hard to retire at 55. I don't know anybody that really retires at 55 because you're giving up your health care. That's probably the biggest thing, and then you're taking a reduction. So the conversations that we had, we asked our actuaries to help us out, and they said, well, you can do this. Get your health care at 55 if you go early. We're not going to discount it at all. And it's a unicorn to be able to retire at 55.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about what the impact of the fund is on some of these costs? I know forever, coming up in this trade, coming up at Local 103, when at the union meetings, when they talked about that pension fund, it was always somewhere down the road, some mysterious date, 10 years from now, we're going to be 100% funded. That was always the goal, is to get to 100% funded. And we were diligent. We never overspent in the pension. We never gave benefits we couldn't afford. We were always prudent, thanks to folks like you and came before you, Rich Gambino and Russell and those guys. Always prudent with the fund, always managed it right, always put the quarters where they needed to go. And here we are years later, and our funding levels are at 100 or better, right? So the money that we're going to spend on helping people get to retirement, how does that affect those funding levels? Are we at risk of going below 100% now?
So that's a great question. And I certainly wouldn't have advocated for this if we were at any risk at all. The last thing I want to do is to ever be sitting in a room with any of those people like I described earlier and say, hey, that promise that we made you, we're not going to be able to keep it. So thing one was to make sure that our funding levels were not going to be impacted in such a way that it was going to jeopardize benefits going forward. All the math that we've done, we're at 106% funded at the end of 2024. Everything that we've looked at, it's possibly going to affect our funding percentage. And this is all going to depend on how many people take advantage of it and what their circumstances are, 2 to 3%. So if we were at 100%, 106%, are we going to go down to 104 or 103%? Okay, that is a reasonable risk to take. We talked about that with the attorneys. Some of the trustees had some great concerns about that. Were they being responsible in making decisions like that where they were going to eat into the funds? It's one thing to say we're going to put a quarter in the fund and we're going to increase the benefits by this amount. That's proactive. That's looking forward. Now we're looking and saying, hey, for this whole group of experience that we didn't plan for, that we haven't pre-funded for, what's the impact going to be if we spend this money? That's one of the advantages of the fund being as large as it is. The numbers are a little bit staggering when you think about it. I mean, even just, if 200 people were to take it for $50,000, right? There's a check I don't want to have to write out of my own personal account. But it doesn't actually have that giant impact on the pension fund because of its funding level. So the actuary was fully on board, understanding what these pieces were, gave us the information that we needed that, yes, this is going to be, depending on how many people take it, a 2 to 3% hit in our funding ratio. But our funding ratio is still going to be in excess of 100%. So we're still going to be able to keep the promise that we made to everybody out there.
Amazing, amazing. And I know we did the math. We figured out how many people are 55 or older that are eligible for pension. And I think the number you said was around 1,000.
Yep, a little under 1,000.
We know not everybody's going to take it. There's going to be a percentage that can't take it. We don't know what that is. Well, I guess we'll see in a year from now. But if everybody took it, everybody took the 50 grand and retired. 1,000 people, it's quite a bit of money, $50 million.
$5 million,
right?
$50 million, yeah.
And a $2 billion fund, it's like 2%. It's like, it's so, it just, again, goes back to how well our funds are run, how great the pension is doing. It's why we're able to give a 13th check. Talk about the funding on it, what it takes to give a 13th check to retirees. It's become almost a victim of its own success, I'll say. It's such a great benefit. We weren't always able to do it. And now that we've done it 3 out of 4, 3 out of 5 years, people almost come to expect it. Right. What's the impact of the fund of a 13th check, and what does it cost?
So a 13th check, our pension plan writes approximately $8 million in checks every single month to about 2,700 retirees. So that's the gross every month.
$8 million out
$8 million out the door. Yep. So when we write a 13th check, it's another $8 million. Well, it's also 1/12. So that's approximately an 8% increase in our plan's expenditures for that year. The other side of that is that's an 8% pension bump for everybody who's on retirement who collects a 13th check. That's a pretty good raise in any given year. I know it's not cumulative because that doesn't increase their base number, but it's 8% higher for that year. That's definitely nothing to sneer at. Doing that year over year over year, same answer. It's not cumulative, but it's an 8% increase in the amount of that year's expenses.
Yeah. Talk about, so the 13th check, we give it when we can afford it, as opposed to an increase like a cost of living increase. That's every month, every year going forward, even the bad years. So talk a little bit about that. It helps, given the 13th check over as cost of living, helps us avoid doing damage to the fund.
Yep. So a cost of living, even if it's a 1% cost of living, that applies to all years that everybody worked for all of their retirement. As we talked about your career here, the multiplier was whatever the multiplier was when you started, and the contribution rate was whatever it was when you started. That was in the early 90s. Somebody who's sitting there retired now, their career might have started in the late 60s or early 70s or even older than that. We've got some pretty old retirees. Those contribution rates were even lower. So when you start adding 1% on top of what the dollars that came in for that, I'm not blaming the individuals. We want them to continue to live a long and happy life. We want to be able to continue to fund that. But the plan was never designed to pay out those kinds of benefits on that level of contribution. There just isn't a matching there. Those contributions are so small. The average pensioner takes out all of the money that went in on their behalf in about 6 years after retirement. So after that, they're effectively playing house money. That's a terrible way to put it, but they're being paid from the earnings. The principal was spent in the first 6 years. So every time we do a cost of living, it's taking in everybody who's retired for their entire career and increasing that benefit. And that's not something that you can take back. You can't say, oh, we gave everybody a 1% increase and then everybody took it, and now instead of getting $1, they're getting $1.01 every month. 5 years from now, if returns aren't as good for an extended period of time, as in from 2008 to 2012, we can't turn around and say, hey, you remember that 1%? We need to take that back because we need to be able to continue to keep the promise that we're making to everybody and providing for their benefits. It's a more manageable way to approach it, to do it as on 13th check on an as-decided basis. We take a look at what the returns were for the pension fund. We take a look at how the pension plan did over the course of the year, what were contributions over expenses. Again, we also never want to be in the position, a lot of those funds that we talked about earlier that were needing help or unable to keep the promises that they made, part of the reason for that is they're in industries where the work has gone away and there aren't workers anymore continuing to keep that pension plan vital and thriving. So the only thing that's left is people drawing benefits off of it. At some point, that balance tips, and right before the end, there were people working who weren't going to get a benefit. They had a contribution that wasn't going to their wallet. It was going into that plan. And they probably didn't know it at the time. And the people running the plan probably didn't know when that date hit. But that money was only going to go to pay benefits to people who'd already retired. That continuum is always there. As long as there are people working, it's a better answer. We can forecast as long as there are people working. When those things change, right? As I said earlier, Local 103 has expanded and exploded over the course of my time here. That has allowed us to continue to provide those benefits. As long as that cash coming in is higher than the benefits going out, we know that we're funding future benefits. We're funding the benefits for the people working today with the money coming in today. We don't want to be using the money coming in today to pay the benefits for the people who retired in the past.
Sure. Talk about like certain industries that had deregulation impact them, or the factory where your father worked got closed and shipped off to wherever, and other pensions that had to get bailed out over the past few years made bad decisions based on, hey, we're going to give benefits that we can't afford and we'll worry about it later. That's something this plan's never done, and it really speaks to why we're so well funded and why we're able to give the benefits we are, because we make smart decisions based on real money that we can afford to make.
Well, I was an auditor in the early 2000s, and the Department of Labor was going through, and they were looking at plans, and this was prior to the Pension Protection Act of 2006, which is the one that came up with the green zone and the yellow zone and all the color charts. But they were actively trying to figure out how to regulate some of that and how to look at that. And ultimately, I think their aim was good. They were trying to make sure that the money that was not going into people's wallets was actually going to benefit them. Having a 175% funded pension without plans to increase the benefits, is that money ever really going to get to those participants? What's happening with it? Where's it going? We want to make sure it gets to the participants. So they came around and they did a bunch of audits and they looked and they said, well, if your funding is higher than, and they drew some sort of an arbitrary line, I don't remember what the number was, you have to increase benefits. My recollection is Local 103 got one of these letters. They sat down with council and they said, we don't think that's right. We don't think that's prudent. We regularly increase benefits. We go through this thing. This is our process and this is how we do it. And the DOL accepted it. which is great because that was in 2002, 2003. We had a ton of work going on in the area. The power plants and the big dig were all happening. 5 short years later, it was 2008. The world came to a collapse. All those funds that didn't stand up to the government at that point and say, hey, we don't think that's prudent, and they increased benefits like the government told them, they got in trouble. And they were underfunded, and they had to go into a funding improvement plan. And under a funding improvement plan, you're not allowed to increase benefits unless you can do certain things, unless you can manage certain things. It takes control away from the trustees, the ability to exercise their judgment and to provide the best benefits for participants. So that long stewardship of the plan and the trustees' willingness to say, no, we don't think that's right, please look at it again. It wasn't defiant. It wasn't an FU. It was just, this is what our plan is, and this is how we do it, and respectfully, we'd like to keep doing it our way.
Yeah, amazing. Mike, you're a wealth of information when it comes to things that are important to Local 103 members. The most important, certainly their jobs are important, but their health care for their families, their pensions for their future, so important. You're an excellent steward to all of our funds. We could sit here all day, but we both don't have all day. I know you're going to get back upstairs and manage the funds. But as a kind of like a last, as we wrap up, what keeps you up at night managing a $4 billion fund? What keeps you up? Everybody goes to bed sleeping, knowing that they have great health insurance and a wonderful pension. That's wonderful. What keeps you up at night worrying about those types of things? Keeping it going.
The first is the number. Is $4 billion. That's a real hard number to wrap your head around. If you spend $1,000 a day, it takes you 1,000 days, or a little over 3 years, around 3 years, to spend $1 million. It takes you 3,000 years at that rate to spend $1 billion. That really hits home. I am working for 10,000 other people. The decisions I make on a daily basis, the things that we put in place on a daily basis directly impact those people. Cybersecurity is a big issue. I hear a lot from our participants, why can't we do some of these things online? And ultimately, kind of the answer for that is we're a 20-person staff. We don't have the technology capability to make the investment to safeguard your stuff strongly enough and have those things out there. As those tools and suites of tools get cheaper and more accessible, we will do those things. So it's really about security, and it's really about making the right decisions. This isn't my money that I'm playing with, it's their money. And I'm not playing with it, and I'm trying to get the best benefits they can. And there's also 20,000 people out there whose health coverage relies on us and the decisions that we make on a daily basis. And that's the part that does keep me up at night, is how do we do a better job? How do we make this? Because when people interact with us, yeah, retiring's fine, right? That's a happy time. There's an eligibility question. That doesn't come up just out of the blue. It comes up because their kid needs to go to the doctor, or they need to pick up a prescription, or they get hurt. That's when those things come up. A claim didn't get paid. Somebody passed away. They're going through a divorce. We deal with them in all these times of their lives as well. So there's a lot of the tough times that we're standing next to these people or working with these people, and so we feel a lot of that as we go through it, and we just want to be that resource for them.
Yeah, awesome. And it goes back to the first thing you said when we started talking was rule number 1, don't lose any money. And rule number 2, revert back to rule number one. Do not lose anybody's money. Mike, thank you so much. Thanks, I really appreciate you giving time to talk about these things. I will definitely have you back again. There's so much to talk about. Members want to hear about their funds, how they're funded, why are the decisions that are being made, why are they being made? And you just helped answer a lot of that stuff. So I can't thank you enough for coming on the job on our podcast to talk about these things. So, Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you, and thanks for the time.
Yep, good stuff.